In today's gaming news, Elder Scrolls Online is coming to consoles, access to Planetary Annihilation's alpha cost $90, and Nintendo says to prevent used game sales, you should probably make better games. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. It is Friday, June the 14th. My name is Force, here with your day's gaming news. First up today, during this week's E3, we found out that the Elder Scrolls Online will be coming to consoles. The console version of Elder Scrolls Online will be available on both the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It appears that no cross-platform play will be available, so the PC, Xbox, and PlayStation versions will each have their own mega servers. While this does mean a segregated player base, it also means that PC users can look forward to much more frequent updates than the console counterpart. Now, the reason I say that the PC version will get updates more frequently, it's because there's no authentication process. When it comes to games on the console, you have to go through Microsoft or Sony to actually get updates taken care of, and that liaison in between makes that process take a little bit longer. So for that reason, if you want to get the most up-to-date bug fixes and patches, you're probably going to want to play the PC version of this game. Speaking of the game, the release date has been pushed back. It was originally planned for the fall of 2013. That has been moved now to the spring of 2014. It could get pushed back further still, but as of now, next spring is when we'll be seeing the game. Now, I know a lot of people were following my ESO coverage here on the channel, and that has pretty much dissipated and is no longer existent, but I do plan to cover the game in some form in the future, whether it's here on the channel or elsewhere. I'll let you guys know when I figure that out. Next up in news, we'll be talking about Planetary Annihilation. It is now available for access if you've got $90 to spare. Early access to Planetary Annihilation is now available on Steam for a whopping $90. The reason for this high price point goes back to the game's Kickstarter, where a $90 pledge granted you access to the alpha. This pricing lasts from now until September when the game enters beta, at which point it will be priced at $60. And those of you who have the patience to wait until release will get the game for cheaper even still. So what it all boils down to is they're trying not to piss off their Kickstarter funders, which is sort of baffling to me. I don't quite understand the thought process here. I mean, in essence, I get it. If you back the Kickstarter for $90, you get access to the alpha. The game is now an alpha. If you want to play it now, you should have to pay $90, right? Well, that depends. What is the reason for people backing this game? Did people pay $90 just so they could waive the fact that I've got alpha access and you don't? I don't know why this paper represents alpha access. Were they just paying $90 so they could say that they have alpha access and other people don't? Or were they paying $90 because they cared about the game and they wanted to fund the developer to make the game? I always thought that's what Kickstarter was all about, but apparently it's paying to get early access. It's just strange. It's a strange decision to me. It doesn't seem like that's why people are funding the game, so they can pay more money to get alpha access before people, or pay a little less money to get beta access before people. You're supposed to be funding Kickstarter, in my opinion, to care about and support the game. But if that's really why people are funding and they don't want to piss their people off that did that, I guess I understand. But truthfully, when it comes to this early access stuff, you should probably just be charging the full retail price of the game so that people can try it out early. Because all this is doing is restricting people from testing out their game and giving them valuable feedback just so they don't piss off people who funded the Kickstarter. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And last up in news today, Nintendo has stated that if you are concerned about used game sales, you should probably just make better games. Speaking with Polygon on developer concerns about the used game market, Nintendo of America President Reggie Fils-Aimé said, "It impacts games that are annualized and candidly also impacts games that are maybe undifferentiated much more than it impacts Nintendo content. Why is that? Because the replayability of our content is super strong." Yes and no. I can't quite say that I really agree with the statement. I'm not talking about the fact that he's saying Nintendo games are replayable. Lots of Nintendo games have tons of replayability. Sure, that's true. But I don't think the answer to the used game market concerns is to make games with more replayability or make better games. I don't think replayability means better games. Is that does that have to be the case? What about narrative games? What about story-driven games? One of my favorite games from last year was completely story-driven, and that was the Telltale Games The Walking Dead. That is a game that I will never play again because it was about the story. I played it once and that's it. It would be a shame if a game as great as that got punished through used game sales simply because of the fact that it doesn't have a tacked-on multiplayer or they're not adding a ton of DLC. It's a story experience. It doesn't have tons of replayability, but that doesn't make it any worse of a game than a Nintendo game that has tons of replayability. So I don't quite agree with this argument, and I'm not saying that all games should be one and done and that games shouldn't have replayability. I understand some people just want to play one or two games for a few years straight, and that's fine, and games with replayability are fantastic, but I don't think a good game or a better game necessarily means it's a game that you pay for and then you play for infinity and then that's that. I don't know that necessarily checks out. And when it comes to this whole used game fighting fiasco, we've been seeing things like tacked on multiplayer and tons of extra DLC as a response, and I don't know that that's necessarily the answer either. Not that I don't want post-launch support for games, I think that's great, but when it's excluding things that would have been in the game originally to add DLC just so people don't trade it in sooner, well, that's kind of crappy as well. So I guess the final verdict of this is, I don't know the answer to solve the used game problem in the industry. What do you guys think about the statement that having games be replayable is a proper solution to the used game market? Or do you think all games don't necessarily need to be replayable? Let me know what you guys think below. Alright guys, that is going to do it for today's episode of the show. As always, thank you so much for watching. Once again, this has been Forced, and you have just been force-fed. My endings are so awkward, I can't help but laugh. If people really paid $90 to the Planetary Annihilation Kickstarter just to rub the fact that they're in the alpha into people's faces, find out that myself and other people who cover games got in for free, oh man, they're gonna be so pissed. Now I'm just being mean.